and the Environment at Bilthoven, also in the Netherlands. From 2005 to 2012 as head of the Center of Nutrition and Health, and from 2013 to 2015 as Senior Scientific Advisor, Nutrition and Food Safety. He was Editor-in-Chief of Food and Chemical Toxicology and Chief Editor of the European Journal of Nutrition and Food Safety. He was a member of staff at the European Food Safety Authority, Pharma Italy from 2015 to 2018, as head of the Risk Assessment and Scientific Assistance Department from 2018 to 2020 as Senior Scientific Officer. Got quite a biography here. Hans is a board-certified toxicologist since 1990 already, and a board-certified nutritionist since 2005. From 2006 to 2015, he was a member of the EFSA NDA panel, visiting professor at the University of Ulster from 2009. From January 2021, he has also been adjunct professor at the Technical University of Denmark. As of November 2020, he's the owner and consultant at Food Safety and Nutrition Consultancy in the Netherlands. And January 2025, the total number of web and science publications, which includes EFSA scientific opinions, 826. That is, phenomenal. The number of peer-reviewed papers, 185, plus other papers, 157, EFSA publications, 11, publications as editor, 16, other publications in Dutch, 16, the Hirsch Index, Web of Science, 63, Google Scholar, 67, and Scopus, 49. So we are very lucky to have Dr. Hans Verheim this afternoon. And I want to say thank you very much again. And I think maybe we can sort of slowly start. I think more people might still come in, but welcome to everybody so long, and thank you very much. We are looking forward to your presentation, so you can start sharing. Thanks.
Thank you, Ingrid, for this nice introduction. Oh, no. That's not the right one. I'll start doing it again. Yeah. If all is well, you can see my screen now, which I will put in the presentation mode. Yeah. I think it should all work now, eh? Is that correct?
Yes, all in order. Thanks.
Okay, fine. No, thanks for the nice invitation and the good capturing my CV. And I'm happy for the SAFA, South African Food Science and Technology Association, organization, foundation, whatever you are, to present on misconceptions on low and no calorie sweeteners. I have a presentation of, I think, around 45 minutes or so. And of course, if there are any questions or remarks, we can discuss afterwards. I'm in no rush. I told Ingrid already that I have a next appointment in 6 hours from now, so I will not keep you busy that long, but this is good. Okay, this is my presentation. My CV already, you have seen it, so I will not go through that in detail. I now have more than 42 years of practical experience. Formerly, I have reached retiring age, but I work around 4 days a week still because it's far too much fun. And I work as a professor as well as a private consultant. May you be interested. So that's my Hall of Fame. What are we going to do today? I have a presentation distributed into 5 different chapters. First, I'll give you an introduction into the topic of food additives, and just to warm you up. Then a short course in toxicological risk assessment, which typically takes 20 years, 2 lessons of 10 years each, but I will do that in 10 minutes or even less. Then I will go towards sugar and aspartame as highlights of sweetened products. Also, I will stipulate on other low-calorie sweeteners, and at the end of the line, I will come with some conclusions and we can have further questions and answers. But first, an introduction into food additives. If you want to introduce food additives, you can go into the
Hans, I think you accidentally muted yourself there, hey?
I didn't do anything, but okay.
Somehow it got muted. I'm sorry about that. I don't know
No,
how that happened.
Let me see this again. Yeah, here we must be again. So when introducing the topic of food additives, it's easy to go to the internet and to find some pictures, and that's what I did here. And I like the screen cap in Google way better than individual slides. So when we're talking about food additives, it's always very colorful. There's lots of illustrations. There's lots of people that have an opinion on food additives. Less so on scientific knowledge, if anything at all, but it's good to introduce. So let's introduce food additives or E-numbers. And E-numbers are frequently mentioned. Actually, E stands for European. Okay, I know I'm for a South African audience, and South Africa is not yet part of the European Union, and that it will take some while. But E actually stands for European, and here you can also see an example of other E numbers or other food additives that are contained in a variety of foods. Actually, E stands for European, and it is distributed in a series of different numbers. In the 100s, it comprises the colors. In the 200s, it comprises the preservatives. The 300s is for antioxidants, as well as acidity regulators. 400s is thickener stabilizers, and so on and so on. So food additives have certain numbers, and the E is then for European, and without the E, it's the international connotation, which has basically the same numbering. So it also includes non-nutritive or so-called low-calorie sweeteners. Some of them are in the 400s, so like sorbitol and mannitol. Most of them are in the 900s, and there we have compounds like ACE-K, aspartame, cyclamide, isomalt, saccharin, sucralose, and so on and so on. And they all have very interesting chemical structures, as you can see, and they all look like white powder. And you know, well, that white powder is something that brings out alerts. But is there anything? No. Okay. So food additives are E numbers. There is some information what they are, like red ingredient E124, number food additive 24, Ponzo red, Allura red 129. It's contained in a lot of products like dessert toppings, salami, salad dressing, soft drinks, medications, cosmetics, and so on. So this is the practical information where it is contained, as well as it is also very easy to find comments. Like the one to the left that is Ponzo red, gives allergic reactions. The next one, mild allergic symptoms, asthma, sensitive skin, and so on and so on. So there's always an issue with additives and E numbers. Also, this one I found on the internet quite a few years ago, and that's also very indicative of setting the scene. The first ones are questioned with respect to the safety, and then they have a variety of assignments like dangerous, forbidden, suspicious, forbidden, dangerous, and so on and so on. So by this time of the day, you would not even dare to go for food additives and e-numbers, because they all have some connotations that you may not like. But let's go a little bit beyond and see what is actually true and what's a myth. E, I already told you, that stands for European. Fine. They comprise food additives that have been assessed for use within the European Union and also other countries in the world, also like South Africa and Asia and America and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. The safety assessment and approval of these food additives are the responsibility of the European Food Safety Authority and similar entities in other places in the world. And the numbering scheme follows the international numbering system as determined by Codex Alimentarius. With the E's, it's in Europe, and without the E's, it's in other places in the world. And in casual language, artificial food people speak about artificial food additives, but also take into account that not all the food additives are of artificial origin, because there's also natural ingredients that do have an E number, such as vitamin C, which is E300, or lycopene, the ingredient from tomatoes that has the numbering 160D. Okay, by now you have been introduced into the area of food additives and you may not even dare to eat them. But let's go into toxicology and risk assessment rather than speculations and internet sources. So I'll give you a short course into toxicological risk assessment. Suppose you have a new ingredient. It can be a new additive, it can be a food ingredient, a coloring ingredient, a pesticide that you want to use and that may end up in the food chain, intentionally or unintentionally. How will you get a grip on the safety of such an ingredient? I will introduce you the concept of acceptable daily intake setting. What you typically do, and I'm not sure if you can see my mouse moving on the screen, but start to the right. You start with studies in animals, also a little bit in vitro studies, but that's too complex for now. You start in studies with animals across a dose range. At a higher dose range, you will see effects in the experimental animals, in the rats typically. At lower dose levels, you will not see anything, and at intermediate dose levels, you will see some moderate effects, only part of the animals suffering from the adverse effects or less severe effects. This leads then to a certain dose level, which is called the no observed adverse effect level. In this theoretical scheme, that is at 100 milligrams per kilogram body weight. It's always expressed as milligrams per kilogram body weight. At 100, the dose is so low that there is nothing happening. That's why it's called a no observed adverse effect level. At higher dose levels, there is an effect. So what you now conceptually consider is that a rat is a proxy to humans. So a no observed adverse effect level in rats is theoretically also a no observed adverse effect level in humans. But you also want to comprise differences between species. So you apply a safety factor or an uncertainty factor, whatever you apply. So the no observed adverse effect level that is not doing anything in experimental animals is divided, for instance, by a factor of 10 in order to derive a no observed adverse effect level in humans. Further on, you also consider that the one human is not the same as the other human, and therefore you apply another uncertainty or safety factor to cover up for intra-species variation. And again, as per this example, another factor of 10. So at the end of the day, starting from a point of departure, no observed adverse effect level established in experimental animals. In this example, at 100 milligrams per kilogram body weight, you divide that no effect level by 10 times 10, and you achieve a value which is called the acceptable daily intake at 1 milligram per kilogram body weight. So if conceptually 100 is without any effect because the dose is too low, certainly 100 times less is certainly without effect. And this is how acceptable daily intakes are established. As you can also see from this arrow, you start at high dose levels with clear adverse effects. At lower dose levels, there is no effect anymore because the dose is just too low. And as such, the acceptable daily intake has been defined already decades ago by the World Health Organization as the daily intake of a chemical, which during an entire lifetime appears to be without appreciable risk on the basis of all known facts at the time. In order to get some meat on the bone, here are the acceptable daily intakes of some sweeteners in the European Union. Here you can see, for instance, aspartame. The associated E number is E951, and the acceptable daily intake is 40 milligrams per kilogram body weight. ASK, another number, ADI has a lower level, 9 milligrams per kilogram body weight, and so on and so on. All the E numbers will have an associated acceptable daily intake because their safety has been assessed in well-designed studies. We can also translate these acceptable daily intakes of how much would you need to consume on a daily basis in order to achieve this safe level of intake. And that has also to take into account the sweetening properties. So the 40 milligrams per kilogram body weight for aspartame, let's say, translate into the daily consumption of more than 4 liters of a beverage or a Diet Coke or etc. More than 4 liters of a beverage day after day during an entire lifetime in order to achieve a dose level that is 100 times below a dose level that is without effect. So that must be convincing that it is safe. Now, similar considerations for other sweeteners in the column to the right, that it's all in the area of at least several liters, and I'm pretty sure you will not consume that much an amount of Diet Cokes and similar products every day during your entire lifetime. Leave it alone that you will consume 100 times more, achieving a dose level that is without effect. Now, the middle column makes some calculations for smaller for children, even that it is not realistic to assume that people consume that much an amount, which then translates these levels were established to be safe and are established to be safe. Let me go to the next chapter, because the presentation is on sweeteners, and I would like to highlight one comparator sweetener also before, which is ordinary sugar. Saccharose, fructose, etc. Going for sugar, again, can easily go to the internet in order to find some illustrations, which I did here. Sugar typically is coming from either beets, sugar beets, or sugar cane, or honey, etc. You all know what sugar is, of course. Also, the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, did publish an opinion about 3 years, a bit more than 3 years ago, on added and free sugars. And EFSA concluded that based on the available data and related uncertainties, the intake of added and free sugars should be as low as possible in the context of a nutritional adequate diet. So EFSA did a very thorough study. It took them many, many years in order to come to that conclusion. And I worked for EFSA a long time ago. 14 years in total, 9 years as an external scientific expert, almost 3 years as one of their directors, and 2 years as senior scientific officer. But EFSA is good, but EFSA is not God. And I looked with a couple of colleagues at what EFSA actually has written there. Now, this is their scheme from their draft publication. It has disappeared from the ultimate publication, but the draft is more clearly illustrating the matter. In the EFSA draft scientific opinion on tolerable upper intake levels for dietary sugars, you can see.
Can we use my laptop?
Yeah, use Sofika's laptop then.
Okay.
Yeah, I say I've logged it into another.
Okay, I continue. EFSA has published the draft opinion preceding the final opinion on adverse effects of sugars. And here you can see actually that there is only high certainty for adverse effects for sugar-sweetened beverages only. For fructose, for fruit juices, for added and free sugar, there's either little or no evidence as per this scheme. So this means that only the sugar in sugar-sweetened beverages is really to be avoided. Moreover, together with my couple of top toxicologists and nutritionists to the right here, you can see what we considered of this EFSA scientific opinion, and we saw that there was something strange in there. For instance, EFSA published a scheme on the relationship between the intake of sugars and the blood levels of fasting glucose. And you can see the straight line there going straight through, let's say, what could be considered the origin in this scheme. But if you look very precisely on what EFSA did, is that the zero level on the y-axis is at this level. Of course, I cannot repeat for copyright reasons and write in the paper there, but this is something that can clearly illustrate what EFSA did, indicating a threshold for the effects of sugar on fasting glucose. Yet, EFSA concluded that added and free sugars should be as low as possible, which I would question. The similar story for sugar and fasting triglycerides. A similar scheme with the uncertainties, etc. Apparently, the line is directing towards the origin, but also take into account here that the zero on the y-axis is a little bit higher, indicating, as in the previous figure, that there is a threshold at grossly around 10% energy of sugar in the diet. And here I also would question, how can EFSA conclude that added and free sugar should be as low as possible? Anyway, that is the warming up of the sugars. Let's go for artificial sugars. Artificial sweeteners, in particularly aspartame, because that's the highlight of artificial or low-calorie sweeteners. And there's an issue there, also a recent one. First, we look at aspartame. It's a very simple chemical. It's comprised of two amino acids bound together in an unusual way, plus methanol. And if you go to the internet, you will find a plethora of concerns and poisonous intakes, etc. But I'm a scientist, so let's go to the science and not to, let's say, other allegations. EFSA has also bothered about aspartame, the latest one in 2013. Their conclusions are easily to be found on their website, and I like that very much. So aspartame was considered at EFSA. There is a scientific opinion published by EFSA in 2013, 12 years ago now. There's an associated subpage, questions and answers, frequently asked questions. And I think in order to illustrate what's the case with this aspartame, they are still valid. I hear my echo, so I hope it's over now. In the question and answer page on the EFSA website, there is a couple of conclusions. I would like to repeat them because they're relevant also towards the remainder of my presentation. Of course, it answers the question, what is aspartame? Yeah, a low-calorie intense sweetener, approximately 200 times sweetener than sucrose. EFSA did evaluate aspartame many times. In 1984, actually, that was by the Scientific Committee on Food when EFSA did not exist yet. And EFSA did evaluate in 2006, 9, 11, and 13. Why does EFSA evaluate this? Because there's a law in Europe that food additives should be re-evaluated from time to time. And the European Commission has asked EFSA to prioritize aspartame already in 2011, 2 years before the final publication. Why have questions been raised about aspartame in the past? Like with all food additives, the safety of food additives as well as aspartame has sparked interest and controversy. But EFSA said that the scientific evidence is sufficient to confirm that aspartame is safe for human consumption. And EFSA published this opinion in 2013, 12 years, almost 12 years ago. EFSA is independent, and that is not surprising. EFSA, in its scientific opinion in 2013, the EFSA panel concluded that aspartame was not of a safety concern at the current aspartame exposure estimates at the ADI, the acceptable daily intake, as I already explained to you, of 40 milligrams per kilogram body weight. Therefore, there was no reason to revise the acceptable daily intake of aspartame. So after a lot of evaluation, a lot of effort, EFSA confirmed that the ADI of 40 mg per kilogram body weight remains safe. But the story continues. There's not only EFSA in the world, there's also other entities. Two of them I would like to mention explicitly because they have come into the picture in 2023. That's only 2 years ago. The one is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is a subsidiary of the World Health Organization. And the other one is the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, which is also residing under the World Health Organization. Let's first go to the IARC evaluation in 2023. In their booklet that was published in December, they focused on aspartame, and this is what they summarized. And there will be a lot of details coming to you. With respect, the IARC was focusing on cancer effects in humans, cancer effects in experimental animals, mechanistic evidence, and the overall conclusion. And there will be details coming up in due course. Now we focus on the overall conclusion, and the IARC said that aspartame is possibly carcinogenic to humans, group 2B. Okay, this sparks interest, because if you have a compound that is possibly carcinogenic in humans, that sounds pretty dangerous, I could say. I would not say that, but I could say this. Let's look at the IARC classification scheme. They have 5 groups. Group 1, that is definitely carcinogenic. Group 2A, which is probably carcinogenic. 2B, possibly carcinogenic. Group 3 is not classifiable. And group 4 is probably not carcinogenic. So this sounds good, but there is a bit. Anyway, aspartame ended in the middle. Possibly carcinogenic to humans. But let's go to some of the details there. First, let's look at what are the data on cancer in humans. And I copied this from the evaluation by the IARC, and this is not legible, I know. So only the buzzwords that are relevant for you to know, I highlighted there, which is limited evidence, a positive association, a bias and confounding, not excluded, a proxy, etc. So epidemiological studies are a proxy. They find a positive association, but they are prone to bias and confounding, leading to limited evidence. This is the cancer part in humans chapter. The cancer part in experimental animals, by the same approach, a lot of words, and the relevant ones for you are limited evidence, DUBs with respect to the adequacy of design of studies. There were concerns about statistical analyses, and there were concerns about conduct and interpretation. Only one minority member of the committee had no concerns. I will not expand on that. And let's look at the mechanistic evidence, actually along the same structure. Limited mechanistic evidence. So there were a series of limitations in the human data, limitations in the experimental data, limitations in the mechanistic evidence, leading to the overall conclusion that only a minority, which is one person, supported probably carcinogenic, and the rest concluded possibly carcinogenic in humans. Let's see what JECFA, the other entity residing under the World Health Organization, the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, later in 2023 concluded in their document, as you can see here to the left. JECFA in 23 said that aspartame upon consumption is fully hydrolyzed. The constituents are also released from common foods. There is no increases in plasma level of these constituents. They also concluded from a tox perspective, there is no reasons to expect genotoxicity. The pivotal studies for risk assessment produced negative results. And they also affirmed that some studies were not usable for their risk assessment. This made JECFA to conclude in their final report that there is no concern for carcinogenicity. And this contrasts with the findings of the IARC. I will come to that later. In their overall conclusions, they were safe. And they said, yes, we reaffirm the acceptable daily intake of aspartame at 40 milligrams per kilogram body weight. So actually, this is where we are now, that in the past, EFSA, in many evaluations, 5 in total, the last one in 2013, EFSA concluded it's safe. The International Agency for Research on Cancer concluded possibly carcinogenic. And the final one, also residing under the World Health Organization, the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, said we confirm the safety of at the same dose of 40 milligrams per kilogram body weight. Here, I must make a short sidestep because the only red tape here is slightly red tape is around the IARC evaluation from 2023, which comes down to the classifications of carcinogenicity. I already identified the groups 1, 2A, 2B, 3, and 4. And they go for carcinogenic to humans, probably carcinogenic, possibly carcinogenic, not classifiable as carcinogenicity, and not carcinogenic. And now I ask you to look at the mere numberings. In total of more than 1,000 compounds, 120, that's more than 10%, end up as clearly carcinogenic. 82, less than 10%, that's probably carcinogenic. More than 300, that's possibly carcinogenic, and that's the same category as for aspartame. Almost half not classifiable, and only one compound of more than 1,000 is not carcinogenic. So here I would say, what is the validity of the system of calling something carcinogenic if only 1 out of 1,000 is not carcinogenic, and the rest has some connotations with carcinogenicity. I think this may be considered a bit over the top. Okay, that is what I leave from now. Let's leave aspartame and also look a little bit at other low-calorie sweeteners. A few examples here. This is stevia glycoside. It's a newer low-calorie sweeteners. It's a fancy these days because it's of natural origin. It stems from a plant, as you can see here. It's from the Stevia rebaudiana plants and leaves. It has been evaluated in Europe in the past. In 1998, before EFSA was established, the safety could not be established because the information submitted in those days was considered insufficient. In 1999, 1 year later, the Scientific Committee on Food said the substance is not acceptable as sweetener on the basis of the presently available data. 10 years ago, 10 years later, updated dossier was submitted in those days, in 2010, EFSA was in place. EFSA issued a positive opinion, and that made the European Commission to authorize the use of stevia glycosides as a low-calorie sweeteners. And as such, it was established that by EFSA that there is an acceptable daily intake by the same parameters and concept that I presented at the onset of my presentations at 4 milligrams per kilogram body weight. It was based on by application of an 100-fold uncertainty factor, 10 times 10 for covering up between and across species, on the basis of a no observed adverse effect level in a 2-year carcinogenicity study in rats at 2.5% stevioside in the diet. So that's the basic procedures as has been used also for others. The no effect level corresponded with a dose level of 388 milligrams per kilogram body weight, and 388 is around 400. Divide by 100, and then you end up with 4 milligrams per kilogram body weight. This is how it works. So it's on the market now, authorized in the European Union for about 1.5 decades. What can also be of interest to you is that EFSA and also other entities from time to time re-evaluate dossiers. And that leads to interesting findings. These are a series of 3 other low-calorie sweeteners, saccharin, ACE-K, and neotame, only a couple of weeks ago, where the acceptable daily intake upon re-evaluation was higher than the original version. Saccharin was increased from 5 to 9, ACE-K from 9 to 15, and neotame, which looks almost like aspartame, from 2 to 10, which means that their higher dose levels were considered safe than originally, which I think this is a good finding of good scientific discussions and good scientific findings. So we are nearing the end of my presentation. I know that it has been recorded, so Ingrid and her colleagues will put it somewhere on the SAFOST website, which is fine with me. If you want to know more, you can also go to some of the short videos that have been video recorded by the International Sweeteners Association, of which I'm a scientific advisory board member. And there we had a similar test as myth-busting sweeteners in less than a minute. So if you're bored with me in 45 minutes, you can also do it in 1 minute. The link is there. At this stage, I would say thank you for your attention. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I had to laugh at you there because we didn't get bored with you. I think that you gave quite a great presentation. I think it's always good for all of us to listen to all of these different things. I actually have got a question so far, but if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to write them in the chat so that we can read them, and then we'll ask Dr. Vagen to answer them. So the one question is, it's actually Nigel who said if it wasn't covered in the presentation, but You would like to hear the speaker's opinion on the controversial 2023 WHO guideline on the use of non-nutritive sweeteners for assisting weight loss, and in particular, the questionable rationale of the study results that were used to motivate their position, and which excluded evidence from randomized controlled trials which did not agree with the WHO position. He would also like to hear his broader-based opinions on the seemingly increasingly ideological rather than scientific-oriented position of the WHO on food additive-related matters.
Yeah,
That's a mouthful. I don't know whether you want to want me to read first part again and maybe just comment on that first.
I read it in the chat box, so that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
And I thank Nigel for bringing this up. Yes, you're right. There are some data where they rely more on observational data rather than intervention studies, and I have to say I'm not in favor of using observational studies, epidemiological data to do the risk assessment on, because it is readily prone to bias, to confounding, to reverse causality, and pick your favorite words there. I'm much more in favor of intervention studies where you can be very clear on this goes in and this is the outcome. And if people want to treat the data differently, as you say already, randomized controls trials were ignored or excluded evidence. That's what you use. So I don't like it. It's also of interest to see that there are two World Health Organization entities, the IARC as well as the JECFA, which actually they don't have opposite views, but they answer different questions, but they are not warmly in line. Let's put it that way. And I'm much more fond of what the JECFA concluded, and I'm a bit critical about the conclusions from the IARC. That's why I also put the one scheme that of more than 1,000 compounds evaluated by our IARC, only one is clearly not carcinogenic, and that it may be a bit over the top.
It's a bit difficult when these associations or these organizations do not communicate with each other, because what happens is that the consumer then thinks, well, we can't trust science anyway, because look at what's happening here. And and that is really a big problem, because the consumers already don't know. Anyway, but do you want to answer that second question there? Do you want to read it yourself?
Yeah, I need to read it, of course. Just while code extenders are intended as guidance, how do I interpret the absence of a food additive from the GSFA, whatever that is? The preamble suggests that only listed additives are approved for use. Oh, that I don't know. Yet note 1 clarifies. Cannot answer it because I don't have the background though. I don't know what the GSF. I'm not a codex expert, and I don't know what the GSFA is. I'm a toxicologist, so
the GSFA is the list of food additives and the amounts that are allowed to be used in the different foods. You know, like for instance, in a beverage or in a whipped cream or in something like that. All the different. So it's actually a list of all the different additives and where they are allowed to be used and the amounts that they are allowed to be used at. So she basically wants to know if it's not listed, but if you don't know that, then maybe someone else knows that answer who's on the call. Please feel free to say that if you do. Otherwise, we can actually see if we can find the answer somewhere for her. Nigel, do you want to answer that? You can unmute yourself. Nigel?
Muted.
You're still muted,
Got
Nigel.
it there. Okay, I'm there.
Muted again.
Why do they keep unmuting me? Okay, mute. Right. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. Right.
Oh no.
I don't touch anything, so.
I know. I'm not sure why that happens, Nigel.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Is that better? Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know why it was doing that. Yeah, look, the Codex process for additives is as long drawn out as any other. I mean, I think we've obviously got to have faith in JECFA, and I'm sure, Hans, you would agree with that,
Yes.
It's imperfect like anything else, right? But it is there, and I think the advantage of GSFA is that it provides a global reference point. We all know Codex is not prescribed in law, but it is a very strong recommendation, and you can have confidence that it's been properly motivated, whatever JECFA and Codex have decided. The situation is, from a local point of view, I can't speak for other countries, is that our food additive regulations simply refer to GSFA all the time. So, for the benefit of the person who asked the question, you can love it or hate it, but if that's what GSFA says, you've got to go along with it. And whether it's safe or not is neither here nor there as far as South African legislation is concerned, right? And to get anything changed in GSFA is a fairly major exercise. But that's the other reason why we should welcome locally the wholesale adoption of GSFA for food additive purposes. It's not perfect, and some people will disagree with it, but it's a very valid reference point, and it means you always know where you stand. I like Codex personally for all its imperfections.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
question was though, Nigel, whether if a product isn't listed there, does that mean it's not allowed to be used? That was what I think she asked.
Let's be clear on this. If it's not in GSFA under South African law, you can't use it. Remember, GSFA's got the 3 sections, right? First of all, the list of categories and what additives are allowed in each. Secondly, the list of additives and what categories you can put it into. So it's the thing turned the other way around. But very importantly, and a lot of people miss this in GSFA, is you have that whole 3rd section at the end, which lists a whole series of additives which can be used at GMP in anything. There are some auxiliary notes, which is probably wise to check on because there might be some funnies in there. But remember section 3 or the final section of GSFA for that. Sorry, I'm not trying to hijack the process, but it does perhaps help people a bit.
If I can maybe interject, sorry, Ingrid, just to give a bit of context to my question. So I'm the one who asked it. So obviously there's been the release of the draft regulation a few months back. And this is specifically, the question is coming from where Patent Blue 5 was listed in the colorant local regulations. Now with the compilation of all of those regulations into this draft additive guidance, it simply says, go to JEFSA. So I've reached out to both the Codex Secretariat and JEFCA on that specific colorant, and JEFCA came back to say they've done their evaluation, it is safe. I haven't received an answer yet from Codex on, I think my question is, I'm struggling to understand how to interpret it if JEFCA has done an evaluation, but it's simply just not listed on that online database or in the actual standard. Because in the preamble, it states, if it's not listed, it's not authorized for use. But if you look to the note 1 on the preamble, it says, if it is not listed, doesn't necessarily mean that it's not safe to use. So I'm just trying to, obviously our draft regulations is not published yet, but I'm just trying to be a bit proactive. If it is get published as it is, we'll obviously have an issue from a business point of view because that colorant is used in a lot of our products. So I think I'm just trying to figure out how do I interpret that in relation to a specific colorant that's not listed in JIFSA, but it was listed in our local regulations under colorants.
Well, I suppose I better answer that one. Sorry, Hans. It really looks as if I'm trying to hijack the process here.
No.
We've gone local, and
we've got two people who actually.
You can't be an expert on legislation in every single country that you speak to. You know, it would be very, very unfair. Look, I mean, the local legislation. Yes, the additive regulations. Haven't been. I think they haven't been fully gazetted yet, and as it stands at the moment, you go with existing legislation. The fact of the matter is that when the miscellaneous additive regulations become law, you're going to have to change if you're out of line with what's there already. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
So start making a plan, because a lot of people are moving where there are these discrepancies, and I think a lot of us are aware that they do exist. You need to start making a plan. It's as simple as that. Be grateful you're not in the States with all the crazy stuff that's going on over there at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That clarifies. I think it's just for me, I'm not sure if I'm just misunderstanding it. I just feel like the two statements are a bit contradictory. The one says if it's not listed, and the other one says, oh no, it might be, if it's not listed, it might still be authorized. So I think I just want for future to reference, what are they actually saying?
Okay, wait, maybe we'll give Sheldon a quick chance, and then.
Hi everyone, I'm Sheldon Bradar. I work as a food safety consultant, and often what happens is, if in our experience, so we had a client a few years ago who wanted to use a preservative that is uncommon in their specific type of product. And when we reached out to the national regulators, they said, okay, you guys will have to conduct a study. As long as you can prove that it is not harmful in any study thus far, you can use it and then test the levels in a longitudinal study. And we've been doing that for about 5 years now, and the national regulators have been quite understanding of the fact that sometimes a preservative or a colorant gets used in a new product or in an uncommon product. And as long as your science behind it is solid, they are quite okay with allowing it, as long as you can prove, like you said, Lauren, for GMP limits, for example, we're not going to use more than 4 milligrams of aspartame, as a quick example. So what you can do is you can also reach out to your national regulator. I would recommend that you speak to the NRCS, not necessarily your health inspectors, because they might not know. And what you can also do is, when you do get audited, you can say, well, if you are following international protocol, international standards, as long as our regulation doesn't specifically say you are no longer allowed to use it, then you can use that as a basis of why your company is still using it. That is what I found to have been very helpful. Obviously, if studies come out that show that your specific colorant that you're using is actually detrimental, then yes, you'll have to change it. But if they've just decided to not add it to a new version of a document, then ethically and scientifically, there shouldn't be a reason why you guys should have to change it.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're actually veering off the topic here, though. I don't know whether there are any more questions or things, but I mean, you can also reach out directly to Dr. Verhagen. You're available. We have all your details as well, and people can actually contact you directly. Thank you very much for being so open.
And I like what Marcia Terra said. I had these in my side notes to mention. Indeed, IARC and JECFA are not completely doing the same. The IARC is focusing on the hazard identification, and EFSA and the JECVA is the risk assessment. It's slightly different processes, but I did not expand on that. But it's fully correct. So they're not at discordance, but for the general public, probably yes.
Yeah, I don't think that they know how to make the understand the difference there. That's the problem. Yeah.
So next year, next time when I come back, I will show you the interplay between hazard and risk, and I show it with a lion, and especially in South Africa, you know how a lion looks like. But when it's in the cage, it's a hazard, but not a risk, and when it's in the Kruger Park, it can be different.
It depends on where you are as well.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your effort in doing this presentation for us. And we hope to see you sometime in South Africa. I made some promises to you, so we'll see. Okay, we have another questions. Do you want to go through that quickly?
It seems, though, that nutrition professional concerned with non-nutrition, yeah, of course. Since I did my PhD in the 1980s, food additives are dangerous, carcinogenic, and any other thing that you do not want. And it's a general misconception. And actually, that people do not understand the interplay between, on the one hand, hazard identification, and on the other hand, risk assessment. Moreover, people typically do not understand the concepts of dose-response relationships and the concept of setting acceptable daily intakes, which are a factor of 100 or sometimes 200 below dose levels that are without effect in experimental animals. People don't, it's black and white. And it's so hard to convince people of something different.
Yeah.
Good question, difficult problem. Yeah, that's sure.
So we're trying to be funny here. Anyway, Okay. I think what we'll do, it's like almost 1 o'clock. Thank you very much for your time again. And yeah, we'll hopefully catch up with you again sometime. That will be really great. And thank you to everyone who was on the call. Have a good afternoon further on. All the best.
Okay.
Thank
you so
much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
End meeting.